Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain. This is Iowa Civil Rights History Podcast, where we tell stories about the contribution Iowans and the state of Iowa has made to advance the civil rights movement. Past stories are being told, present actions will be highlighted, and preparation for the future will be discussed. Here is your host, Eric Nyange.
Welcome back, Professor.
Always good to be here.
Yeah, man. Second time around, and I feel like it's going to be more. Because there's more and more I read your stuff, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. So, thanks for joining me.
Anytime. Always interesting stuff going on.
How do you come up with these stories? Where do you find them on Notes on Iowa? Because you write them every day, or you release them every day.
Well, I mean, I've been writing them every day for like 2.5 years. And I do it as just like a warm-up for what I think of as my actual writing. Although, like, Notes on Iowa, the Iowa Time Machine, or the Iowa History Daily, whatever you want to call it, touches more people in different ways than like my academic writing probably ever will. Hopefully I'll sell a lot of books and stuff like that. But when I'm going to put the calendar together, I do think about inclusivity in a way. I just want to keep a variety of stuff because at the most basic, when I started doing the calendar, I was like, I just want to write 4 paragraphs that are geared towards a general audience that are going to provide people different hooks into Iowa history. Because like some people love sports history, some people hate sports history. Some people are really interested in business history or innovators. Other people are really interested in, like so many people in Iowa are obsessed with the weather.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, Iowans love to talk about the weather. So like, and then it's like, I also try to have a little bit of something for everybody. Now that I've been doing it for like 2.5 years, I'm still adding to the calendar a lot of the different days. And then it's like, I'm really rounding it out. Some days I'll have as many as like 4 or 5. Some only have a couple. But I try to keep a balance of different things. And I think when we talk about like, you kind of reached out to me to do this podcast. You were like, hey, I saw the George Roddy on there. I saw the Satchel Paige, Ernie Banks post on there. Let's talk about those on the podcast. And I think those are 2 really good examples of how I try to find stuff and then pull it in, where it's like George Roddy was a new post. Actually, both of these were new posts in the June kind of entries for this year. And like I was just looking. I was deep in. I got like all sorts of bookmarks saved that are like different things I could go look at for when I'm trying to add to the calendar. If I don't have stuff, I'm constantly putting stuff in the master document. That's like, oh, okay, I could add this if I run across something when I'm reading. If I run across something when I'm at a museum, I'll put that on the calendar, and then I'll develop it when I get to that day. But with that one, I was just like sitting there, staring at the wall, going like, I got to find another one. So I'm just like, I went through, like, I'll go through the Iowa Biographical Dictionary. I'll pull out the Inside Out book from the State Historical Society. I'll pull out whatever else I got around. And I just kept coming up empty. And so then I went to the last resort, Google search, June 8th, Iowa history, or whatever the date actually was. I think it was June 8th, but I could be wrong. And I just like, I bet I was on page 10, page 12, page 15 of results, going like, I'm really going to end up doing this like person from the 1800s that nobody's going to be interested in, because I can like build ones that nobody cares about. And then I came across this George Roddy story, which is fascinating. He's born and raised in Iowa. He plays golf at Keokuk during like the 1920s in high school. He's learning how to golf, which is strange. Golf's just taking off in America in the early 1900s. And then like also to think about like, this is a black man well before Tiger Woods, like, and he's going to not just dominate Keokuk, he's going to dominate golf at a very high level for the opportunities that are available to him.
So you just came across that story when you were searching something else, and then you run into his name?
Well, I was just looking for the date. So I searched by the date because I'm just trying to add stuff on every day. And if I run into like that's one of the things that keeps it really interesting for me, because there's the stuff that I'm interested in, right? Like I went to Iowa State. I don't care about the Iowa Hawkeyes, but I do Iowa Hawkeye stuff on the calendar constantly because other people find it. I bet I know more about the Iowa Hawkeyes than like people that love the Iowa Hawkeyes. And that's, again, back to like, I'm trying to be well-rounded and inclusive of a lot of different interests, where it's like, I want there to be a little bit of something for everybody else. So I didn't have anything. I had no options going for
that date.
that date. And so then I'm like just sifting through like pages and pages of Google results. And I finally came across George Roddy. And so I clicked on an article, read it. It's like, oh, this is not just like something that's interesting to put on the calendar. It's something that I think is really important and not like a lost story, but it's a story like I've studied Iowa history as much as anybody in the last decade. Like, I can't say I had come across George Roddy ever before.
I never heard his name until I read your.
And then what happened is what happened to you is exactly what I want to have happen to people. That like, it's intentional that I only put together 4 paragraphs because I want people to read it, and then I want people to go like
do a research.
Yeah, like I hope people end up down a rabbit hole doing some of these, and like that's the most fun thing about it for me is like I'm always learning new things. I'm writing for a general audience. I'm developing my own knowledge.
Yeah.
But then also it's encouraging other people because I could write way longer stuff. I do that professionally all the time. I could dive really deep into George Roddy. I could write a long article, but like I think it's more fun to like share the magic with other people and give people the opportunity to maybe go out and
dig themselves.
Yeah, and so it's like if I can catch somebody's interest, I think doing history is really fun. We talk all the time with my students about making history and like the actual physical process of doing research and communicating that to other people and learning other things. Like that's what's fun. Yeah. And so like I was pretty excited when you reached out and you're like, oh, this led me down like kind of on a chase to learn more about George Roddy.
Oh yeah. Because I mean, the moment I read it, I was like, oh, you got to be more into this guy than just this. Then I started digging in. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then I think I texted you a couple of days ago. I was like, so this guy looked like he was born in Keokuk, Iowa?
The extreme, the foot.
And we don't know anything about it? And he was this good?
Well, and that's kind of like, if I was going to develop this research more, like the Gate City newspaper, I think I could get deeper into it. Like if I like turned my attention to this, I think I could find more stuff about before he arrives at Iowa. There's like pretty good documentation. Once he arrives in Iowa City, you all of a sudden have like the Iowa City Press Citizen as it is today, one of the strongest newspapers, especially during the 1920s and 1930s in the entire state. And they're covering University of Iowa athletics really in depth. Keokuk has a great newspaper tradition too. That southeastern corner of Iowa is where Iowa's first newspapers were. There's a rich tradition there. They still have great papers today in Keokuk and Burlington. And I bet if I got into those archives, I could probably find some things. But then the other question I would have, and without doing it, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Was George Roddy, black high school golfer at Keokuk, getting much press anyway before he ends up in Iowa City?
Yeah.
Kind of, and I mean, he's breaking barriers at Iowa when he gets there, in that like he's first African-American golfer. He eventually becomes the first black team captain of any sport at Iowa. He's going to be the first black letterman in any sport. So he's really kind of crossing a lot of these lines during this time period.
I thought the story for him walking from Keokuk
to Iowa City. Yeah, it's
Iowa City.
Like 90 miles, 91 miles. I mean, like I walked from Keokuk basically across Iowa a couple summers ago, and I could say like that's a pretty good walk from Keokuk to Iowa City, because like as the story goes, right, his parents couldn't afford a bus fare, so he just took his clubs and his suitcase and he just walked the 91 miles, which you could probably do in a couple of days. Which I think it's important to like remember, people used to walk everywhere. Yeah. And like with way greater frequency. Like George Washington Carver, when he enrolled at Simpson, he walked from Kansas to Indianola. Like that's a very well documented piece of his story after he got like, and a lot of times like I was reading for something else I was working on where it's like a guy like claimed some land out by Algona and then he walked to Des Moines to register his claim. And like stories like that, especially as somebody that works in the 1800s a lot, you just run into all the time and you're like, oh, that person really just walked like 400 miles and they just did it in like They'd just be walking all day and I guess like sleep outside and do whatever. But I mean, it is incredible to think about like this guy going, when you think about like athletes today and like I was kind of caught up in this during this time period also because he arrives at Iowa at a moment where they're suspended from the Big Ten Conference because of like kind of shady
scandal,
slush money scandal. Like they at least how I understand this in the limited kind of look into it. I've done it on the calendar a couple of different times and the important dates with it. And then I've read about it in a few different places. And it's like, it seems to me like they were like paying some of their football players. And everybody during that time was also like, if you were playing football there, you were probably playing basketball and baseball also, like those three sports. A lot of the people were multi-sport athletes, but they had been suspended from the Big Ten during this investigation for the year. And that's going to be like actually unfolding while he's there. Because when he arrives in the 1920s, early 1930s, Iowa, like freshmen can't play sports. NCAA rules, freshmen aren't able to play until like, I think the 1960s or 1970s. You don't have eligibility during your first year. So you arrive on campus, he wasn't going to play anyway. As a sophomore, he comes in and is just completely dominant in the year that Iowa is suspended from the Big Ten. So they're not playing against the other teams. Actually, before the golf season starts in February, the Big Ten's going to rule that Iowa can readmit, but the schedules are already made. So like he's going to win the all-university championship, so he beats everybody else at Iowa. He's going to dominate a lot of local tournaments. He's going to be really, really showing that he's one of the best golfers in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. He was born in 1908. Do we know for a fact that he was born in Keokuk or they moved there? I couldn't find that information.
I couldn't find it either. I didn't look super hard.
Okay.
But my understanding is that he's born and raised in Keokuk. 1908, you're looking at like, if we think about somewhat like connecting the dots, right? And we start to think about like what else is going on in Black communities in Iowa during the time period. We're seeing a huge influx of people leaving the American South post-Reconstruction era.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of like African-American migration into the Midwest for coal mines, things like Butchakinnock and Buxton down in southeastern Iowa, eventually forming some of those communities. We're also seeing large populations and longer standing Black communities along the Mississippi River earlier than in the interior of the state. So like that's where, again, I'm sure we could find this answer somewhere, but it would take more looking.
Yeah. Now he's coming to Iowa what was he coming to study?
Engineering. And he majored in engineering, and he got that degree. He ended up like eventually teaching high school industrial technology and coaching golf, which I think was the pairing, right? He wanted to coach golf, and then it's like you got your engineering degree, you could teach industrial technology. I mean, at least what I came across, and it's like hard because I'm not going to be able to like pull the university records. It seemed like he was, by all accounts, a very good student. And,
I mean, studying engineer, you have to be sharp too.
Yeah, it's not like not like history or something.
Or accounting. How did he ended up in golf? Because at that time, Black people were not playing golf like that.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like the earliest, like it seems like in this origin story, right? Because it's like you come across this and like he was just put into the University of Iowa Hall of Fame in 2022. And you think about like, man, he's been dead since 1988. He played way back 100 years before he's going to go into the Hall of Fame almost, and was clearly a significant contributor. I mean, he won the National Minority Amateur Golf Championship twice. Yeah. Once while a student at Iowa. He won the All-University Championship twice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a dominant figure. He set the record at the Finkbein Field, the golf course in Iowa City where Iowa plays. But then like 100 years go by and then he goes into the Hall of Fame. Being able to find the stuff on his earlier life, and I think like a year from now, check back, because I know people in Keokuk that I can ask that will then go, like, they'll find out. And if you're sometimes like doing local history, if you're in communities, it's so much easier to get the records, because you can like, it's not what you know, it's who you know sometimes, and then what they know, and then how they can connect you to other people. But in that like kind of origin story where he's always like walking with his golf clubs to Iowa City to play golf, he must have started at a pretty young age, or at least like gotten the opportunity to do that earlier.
Because he dominated immediately. It's not like he got there, we're going to teach you how to play.
And he went to play golf. Yeah. Like that's pretty clear from the different stuff I was reading in the newspapers from that time period, that like he didn't like go to Iowa to study engineering and then was like, golf.
I'll do golf while I'm there.
Yeah, it was like he walked there with his golf clubs and one suitcase. And so like he was leaving Keokuk, was recruited to go to Iowa to golf, which like I also, and some of this is like conjecture, right? Like we're making a few jumps here, but also going like, how good of a golfer as a young African-American man did he have to be in Keokuk to get the attention of the golf coach at the University of Iowa to then recruit him, give him a scholarship, when like at that time, Iowa had never had an African-American on their golf team. They had never had a black letter winner in any varsity sport. Like, I'd have to think you were pretty good.
Oh, yeah. He faced that a lot, even when he was at Iowa with his race, that he was pretty good about there's certain places they could not play him.
Well, and you think about, like, where we're at in America in 1920s.
Yeah.
Like, we're on the waning edge of the second rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which had its roots in the Midwest. And, like, Iowa's history with that is not comfortable to look at. We had great attendance at Klan meetings in Iowa during the 1920s. And that's just fallen off. You're starting to see, like, we're still decades before we're going to see, like, Jackie Robinson breaking the color line in baseball. That's why I think this story is so unique. Like, one of the other things with the calendar, when I'm doing notes on Iowa, I try to think of, like, black excellence as excellence, period.
Yeah.
I'm often trying to actually skirt going, like, first black golfer at Iowa. Because I think, like, George Roddy, I can write that entire story, and actually I did write it, and then I tagged in the stuff at the end because it was like, what he was doing was just incredible, period. He won the All-University Championship. He set the Finkbein course record. He is dominating the Big Ten in golf in the 1920s when Iowa wasn't very good at golf.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with him being black. Now,
he was just excellent on the golf.
Well, and that's one of the ways when, like, I think putting together the calendar and thinking about historical inclusion and some of these other things, it's like you can write that story that way, but it's also, like, very important. You lose the context if you drop the piece of, like, well, Iowa had never had a black letter winner before that. It adds to the significance. I think it's important because he was so good. And I think it's also, like, adds to the contrast and improves the story a little bit with that. But I don't know. He had to be just phenomenal.
Yeah, good. I mean, he had to be. I'm really curious now to know, like, how long did he play golf? I mean, because we know people like Tiger Woods, he just started playing golf, like, when he was this tall. And all his life. So I wonder if him, and then another question is, where did he learn it from?
Yeah, and I mean, I got no answers coming from, like, how he, and that's where I think, like, I hope, like, somebody reads the calendar, somebody listens to this podcast, somebody, yeah. Well, and I mean, gets interested. Like, that's one of the things is, like, sometimes people get caught up in history going, like, well, I want to know everything. And I do want to know everything. Yeah. I'm always interested. I'm interested in the most mundane things. But I also hope, like, somebody goes out, starts digging into that, because, like, that'd be very interesting to go and, like, how's he getting access to golf courses in Keokuk? And, like, those records are probably there. Like, most golf courses during the 1920s in Iowa are being built by municipalities, especially ones that are going to be open and integrated. Like, you got to think, like, and again, I don't have any of the answers to any of these things, but it's like, I know that there was a golf course boom, like a golf course building boom in Iowa during the 1920s, because in a lot of my research into the state parks, one of the features that they built at state parks like Wapsipinicon, which is one of the first state parks in Iowa, they build a golf course that's a public golf course because that's a need people are trying to meet. As they're doing that, Iowa has anti-segregation laws. We're an integrated state in the 1920s. And so, like, without knowing the answers to this, you can start to, like, piece some of the things together and go, like, well, I bet Keokuk built a public golf course. So, like, if you're listening to this, you're in Keokuk, go to your city records, dig
Find
in
out.
there. Let's find his membership card from 14. Let's figure out who taught him. Let's get that story. And then like, you can write that book and like, you can thank Eric and I in the notes and we'll buy a copy.
Talking about mundane information, I want to know what type of golf clubs he was using.
Oh, yeah, I don't know anything about 1920s golf clubs.
He graduated at the Iowa in 1931, and then after he broke all this record and being one of probably the best golfer in the state, where did he go after that?
So after he graduates, he actually goes into coaching golf, and he's still playing. So like also, this is where you can actually see the opportunities and maybe the contrast in what's open to him as a college athlete is pretty murky, right? We haven't talked about it here yet, but it's like when Iowa gets kind of admitted back into the Big Ten for his senior year, right? He's coming off 2 all-university championships. The year before, he dominated against Minnesota and set the Finkbein course record. And then as a senior, he's going to lead Iowa to some really significant victories. They beat DePaul, who at that time hadn't lost, I think, for like 2 years. He's going to really lead them to a bunch of victories over the course of the season. But Iowa struggles in the like conference golf standings because he can't play at a lot of the courses. Also, their second, and I don't have his name, and I should. But after the success Roddy had as a sophomore, they brought in another African-American golfer to the team, and they were kind of like 2 of the 3 best golfers on the team. So whenever they end up at these meets that are at courses that they can't play at, and we're not just talking about like Northwestern catches all the heat, and like because he's going to be barred from playing against Northwestern, but he also couldn't play against University of Chicago. He also couldn't play at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. There's multiple schools throughout the Big Ten that are playing on segregated private golf courses that aren't going to let George Roddy compete because of the color of his skin. And it's like you still think about, again, we're a couple of decades before Jackie Robinson. So as that unfolds, like Iowa ends up boycotting, pulling out of the Big Ten meet. And I went back and forth about the language, semantics matter, and you need to be thinking about, you're talking about stuff, because I think like talking about like Iowa boycotts Big Ten meet, which is what I actually put as the headline. Then I thought about that and I went back and forth about it because they pulled out of the meet. Now, like boycott has certain connotations for people, right? You go like, we're boycotting this. That's an active kind of moment of resistance where they pulled out of the meet. And that could also just be the coach going like, well, if we're not going to have 2 of our top 3 golfers, we're going to lose anyway. We're not going with like the scrubs from the team if we don't have George Roddy, our captain, out there going. And so it's like, I kind of went back and forth about that anyway. But like they ended up not going to the Big Ten meet, whether it was a boycott, whether they pulled out because they were just not going to do as well. I like to assume people are doing the right thing. So like,
you're right. I didn't think about that because I read that somewhere and I was like, oh yeah. And right away, I thought the coach just pulled because, if you don't accept our black players, we're not doing it. But now you're saying that, I wonder if George Roddy was not the top player and they say, hey, we're not going to allow this black guy who is number 10 on your team to play, they will be like, don't worry about it. Hey, don't come in today. I wonder if they...
Well, and that's where it's like, I think it's really important to be paying attention to that nuance in history because it's really easy to all of a sudden give people the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And like then it's like, because people will close the gaps between things in their minds really quick based on what you say. And like that's where it's like sometimes people get hung up and they talk about like, it's just semantics. You're just talking about things in this way, or you're trying to like use this specific language. And it's like, well, no, I'm just really careful about what I'm saying because I don't want people to like necessarily misinterpret it.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I hope the coach was like, we're not going. I hope he gave some like big speech. So like if like Disney made this into Remember the Titans 2, like you would have him like writing some letter to the Big Ten about how racial injustice. And it's like, and I don't know that was the case, but I do know that coach brought George Roddy to the University of Iowa. He was willing to break that barrier.
Oh yeah.
So like that's where it's like I try to, as a historian, I'm always trying to think about like I want to be really empathetic, but I don't want to just cross the bridge and think I understand people's motives because I'm trying to empathize with them. Yeah. Because either you end up giving people way too much credit or never enough.
No credit. Yeah. I'm gonna need to look into Charles Kennett.
Yeah.
Charles Kennett, the coach. Now I gotta look into it because now you mentioned another point which is interesting. if he was willing to bring him there, because he knew how good it was, he was willing to break that barrier. So you kind of wonder.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm at least cautiously optimistic.
And of course, he's the coach. They care about winning, so it's like, hey, the top two players.
How good was this guy? And like maybe at Keokuk he was so dominant. See, there's more to the story that we're like missing, which is one of the things with the calendar. It's like I always think about it as like it's an inch deep and a mile wide. You know, like there's all sorts of stuff. I come across different ideas all the time, and it's a way for me to like dive into and appreciate other things in Iowa's history. And then it's like, now I got to go work on my book.
And we're going to need to talk about that. And did you post that one today about a civil rights lady in Iowa?
Edna Griffin, whose son you had on the podcast.
Was that Edna Griffin, the one you posted?
Today, or maybe that wasn't today. Maybe it's like in a couple of days.
Anna, yeah.
I was doing scheduling.
That was yesterday, I think it was yesterday.
Anna Arnold Hedgemans, who you were talking about from Marshalltown yesterday, who like she broke a lot of.
I never heard of her either.
So, like if you were from Minnesota though, you would have heard of her. She spent a lot of her so she was born in Marshalltown, and then her family moves to Anoka, Minnesota. Where if you go to Anoka, like in the way we talk about Edna Griffin in Iowa, like people talk about Anna Arnold Hedgeman in Minnesota, even though she's from Iowa. But like she went on to, I mean, like in the Truman administration, she's getting don't give it too much, because we're gonna have check it out on the Notes on Iowa calendar. You know, notesoniowa.com. You can see it on there. You can read about it, and then you can do your own research, learn all about her.
There you go. Yeah, and we're probably gonna talk about her some other time. At age 57, George Roddy, he won another tournament.
Yeah, he continued to be a pretty good golfer after Iowa. So, like, he left, which was your question originally before, where it's like he left it, and he becomes the coach at Arkansas State for a little bit. He's coach at North Carolina A&T. He's playing in tournaments, but there's still amateur tournaments because he's not allowed on the PGA Tour. Like, the PGA Tour is not going to break the color barrier for 20 or 30 more years. So he's playing, like, he wins tournaments, amateur tournaments, well into like his adult life. He said when he's 57. I always think it's interesting, like after he became a coach, he had won during his junior year. He wins the National Minority Amateur Championship for the United States. And then he wins that again 7 years later, well into his coaching career. He's also, again, the top minority golfer in America. I think about that as almost like winning the Negro League World Series, or like, I mean, and like baseball's grappling with this right now, which we'll talk about in a little bit, where they just merged all the statistics for people like Satchel Paige into like their total career statistics, and are trying to find equivalencies between what people were doing in the Negro Leagues and what was happening in the major leagues. Because during this time period, I have no idea what like the National Minority Amateur Champion, what does that even mean during that time period, based on what, like, as other ones like Jack Fleck from Iowa wins the PGA Championship during this time period too. I want to get in a time machine and bring him and George Roddy together and like have them square off for 18 holes and like for the ultimate 1920s Iowa golfing title.
And I read somewhere, did he teach as well?
Yeah, so actually after he's coaching at Arkansas State, then he's at North Carolina A&T, and then he ends up in Indianapolis, and he's at Crispus Attucks High School, and he's teaching industrial technology. And he forms the school's golf program. And this is where it's like, reading into some of that stuff, at least on a very surface level, it's like he was still a very good golfer well into like when he retired from teaching, because he's like starting golf programs at these colleges and then eventually at this high school. He's going to be playing and winning tournaments. And then he also ends up in the, like, he doesn't move till Indiana until he leaves North Carolina A&T. And so it's like he ends up in Indianapolis, and I know for a fact that he's in the Indiana Golf Hall of Fame, which tells me like he was pretty good later in life also, which, I mean, like Hall of Fame stuff, I never know how to sift out like how people are making those choices or what the other things are happening, where it's like it took 100 years for him to get into the Iowa Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah,
talked about
that's
earlier.
Crazy, yeah. And he died at age of 80 in 1988.
Yeah, so he was gone. I mean, for quite.
So he was, wow. he was going for a while before even Iowa remember. Like, hey, remember that guy George Roddy? Yes.
Well, and I don't know what those conversations looked like, but like if you think back to, he goes into the Hall of Fame in 2022, which means they made those decisions probably in 2021. And like if we think about the national climate around civil rights during that moment, like I think it'd be disingenuous to say like, well, you know, they had George Roddy on the list. You and I were talking about this off air, I think a week ago, maybe. Like we had a much longer conversation about this, but thinking about just like, it doesn't seem like a coincidence to me that in 2022, he goes into the University of Iowa Hall of Fame as like, he's kind of this long forgotten story, but probably should have just went into the Hall of Fame much earlier. And then they're like looking for maybe a person of color to diversify that group.
Yeah.
But if I had unlimited time in life, I would dig into these George Roddy questions. I think I could just bang out a 150-page book on George Roddy, like
hey, that's
real quick.
That might be a good thing.
Man, if I had all the time. So like we talked about George Roddy as like, I was really digging for a calendar post for that day.
Yeah.
And I came across him like on the 15th page of Google results. So the Satchel Paige story that ran was really strange, how I came across that one. So like, I love baseball. I grew up playing baseball. I still like baseball.
Good, because I don't know nothing about baseball. So I was reading, I'm checking the stats, and I'm like, I don't know.
You can find me at the ballpark. I mean, like I walk over to Roosevelt all the time to watch our teams here, like all summer. I mean, my wife and I were joking the other day that this has been like, I'd been kind of out on baseball because I've really soured on professional baseball a little bit. Like I had, because of the team I follow had started to just like get rid of all their good players. And like, there's so much player movement and there's things like that. And like, I understand these are like $1 billion businesses and stuff. Satchel Paige pitched in Iowa a bunch. I came to find out as I was doing this, but actually I was listening to an audiobook of, about Ernie Banks, who is Mr. Cub. My dad loves the Cubs. He grew up on Chicago's North Side. I love old timey baseball history, I guess. Was looking for an audiobook. It came up. It was free. And I was like, all right, I'm going to listen to this Ernie Banks book for 14 hours. And so I remember I was walking through the park and like all of a sudden catches my attention. It's like Ernie Banks talking about how one time in Des Moines, he took batting practice off Satchel Paige when they both happened to be playing for the Kansas City Monarchs during one summer. And I sent myself an email immediately because I was like, that doesn't even make sense to me, because like Satchel Paige is like pitching for like 5 decades. And like Ernie Banks is way after his time. Like the dates didn't seem to line up to me. And I knew Satchel Paige had pitched for a long time. I knew the lore about Satchel Paige, but that's why the calendar is great, because it gives me a chance to like look into stuff. Otherwise I maybe wouldn't. So I started to go like, all right, well, if he did throw him batting practice, they both have to be on the Kansas City Monarchs at the same time. And they got to be playing at Pioneer Park in Des Moines, which is now Principal Park, which was then Sec Taylor Stadium in between, which is what real ones still call it. Satchel Paige has a really interesting career arc. He's going to be playing. He debuts for the Mobile Tigers, playing in the Deep South very early on. He eventually goes and plays for the Chattanooga Black Lookouts in the Black Southern League. He's going to then move to the Birmingham Black Barons, and like he plays for like so many teams. I was trying to get this all straight, like reading it, looking into some of the stuff before coming up here to talk. And it's like, he was taking lots of opportunities. And then he's also like, they're not making a ton of money. They're barnstorming across the country. So a lot of times you're playing like split seasons with different promoters. Yeah. You're going to play like in the like standard Negro Leagues. I was just down in Kansas City at the Negro Leagues museum, which is great if you get a chance to.
Yeah, I haven't been there yet.
It's cool. There's also a really cool Kansas City Jazz Museum in the same building.
Okay.
Like you can go in, check out both. Yeah. Make sure you got enough time, though, because there's like, I don't know, it's really well put together. They're trying to expand. They have the Major League Baseball Kansas City Baseball Academy right there next to it, too, which I think is really cool. But
before you go any further, how long was Satchel Paige before Jackie Robinson?
They're contemporaries.
Oh, okay.
He's older than Jackie Robinson. They definitely were in the same time period.
Okay.
Because Satchel Paige eventually, he plays in all these different like barnstorming. He's playing in the different various leagues available to him while baseball's still segregated before Jackie breaks the color barrier. After Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier, he's going to open the door for other players to make it into Major League Baseball. So Satchel Paige is like probably the most well-respected pitcher. He's certainly the most dominant pitcher in the Negro Leagues in the decades running up to desegregation of baseball at the Major League level. And so he's actually going to not make it into Major League Baseball, though, until he's 42 years old in 1948.
Jeez.
So off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what year Jackie Robinson broke the color line. It's like a couple years before that.
Yeah. 42, that's pretty old.
Yeah, very old. I mean, he pitched into his 50s, though, professionally. Not in Major League Baseball the whole time, but, like, he certainly, so he was the oldest player to ever make his Major League debut when he debuted for Cleveland in 1948. He was the first black pitcher in the American League. He was only the 7th black player in Major League Baseball. So, like, there's in a couple intervening years, and Jackie Robinson was younger, which made him, for Branch Rickey at the Brooklyn Dodgers, right, who's going to choose to sign Jackie, break the color line. I mean, like, it's been super well documented that a lot of thought went into that process. Jackie was a phenomenal athlete. He hit for power. He was a 5-tool player that could run the bases. There was a lot of things that made him, and then also his, like, there's movies and other stuff about it that, like, at least would make you think, like, Jackie Robinson was chosen because of his personality and because they believed he would be, like, a good face for somebody to be a representative of the black community into Major League Baseball and open the door for everybody else. Now, like, I don't know to what extent any of that is, but, like, while he's breaking the color line, Satchel Paige is, like, past most people's prime. Like, you figure, like, the prime age for a Major League Baseball player is usually between 27 and 29 years old. And that's, like, today based off of the analytical metrics that they look at. And it's like, he's, like, by the time Jackie Robinson is breaking the color barrier, he's, like, 40.
Gosh.
Like, you think about, like, LeBron James isn't 40 yet.
Yeah.
But, so he's, like, 3 years older than LeBron is right now after being in the NBA for 22 seasons. And, like, he had been playing that whole time. Like, he starts playing when he's a teenager, and he was, like, so dominant playing in, like, the Negro Leagues. Like, I was reading something that was talking about how, like, a lot of times the guys that would be playing behind him would just sit down because he would just strike everybody out. Like, it'd be, I picture it like I go to my niece's Little League game, and, you know, there's always the one kid in the outfield, like, sitting down in the grass, not paying attention to what's going on. Somebody else, like, chasing a butterfly. Seems like that's kind of like you could have put them out there to play behind Satchel Paige, and he would have still just struck everybody out, and he'd still win because he was, like, that dominant of a pitcher.
Yeah.
And then it's like when he does make it into the major leagues, I mean, like, he ends up winning the World Series in his first season at 42 years old. They're going to, like, and he pitches in the World Series. He's the first African-American to pitch in the World Series. By all accounts, he was pretty good.
Wow.
Like, and at 42 years old.
Wow. So what do you think those are the reason why he did not break the color barrier sooner than Jack Robinson?
I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, like, and I'm sure there's, like, people have, like, well, because people love baseball.
Yeah.
Like, old guys love history and old guys love baseball. Like, people of all stripes in America. And so it's like there are so many baseball books that, like, I'm sure, like, I got to get it. And this is gonna make me know I'm gonna go, like, pick up a Satchel Paige biography because I've always read about, like, hitters, and I wonder if there wasn't something to that. Like, so I'm trying to, like, sift through my mind where it's like I know I've read books about, like, Ernie Banks, who's gonna come later. Or, like, I know I've read about Willie Mays and how he was right after that wave. And then, like, Hank Aaron is going to be after that wave. A lot of those guys that I've read about, like, that also played in kind of, like, the Negro Leagues as they were winding down. Like, they were just looking to get a shot. I think Satchel Paige, by the time the conversation came about, like, this is my understanding. This could be totally wrong. So, like, if you get listener feedback, that's fine. My understanding is that Satchel Paige, everybody already thought he was too old by the time those conversations really seriously started. Like, because, I mean, like, even a few years after Jackie Robinson breaks the color line, like, he's 42. Like, you would be looking for somebody in their 20s at least. Yeah. And so it's like, he's this older guy that's been incredibly dominant, but I think people thought he was on the way down. Like, because even in Major League Baseball, when he debuts in 1948, he's not as dominant as he had been earlier in his career because he's 42. I mean, he's still good. He started a game in the World Series. They win the World Series. You know, he's good. But then the next season, they do end up, like, releasing him at the end of the season. And he then leaves Major League Baseball hoping to get kind of a shot. And he actually forms what he calls the Satchel Paige All-Stars. And they start playing all over the Midwest in particular, and he's going to play a bunch of games in Iowa. Like, I came across when I was looking for the date. So, like, once I kind of got I had this one piece of information from an audiobook. Ernie Banks going, Satchel Paige threw me batting practice in Des Moines.
Yep. And you ran with it.
Well, I dug with it. You know, I got out the shovel, and I went like, all right, so now I got to figure out, like, all right, I'm going to try to... I was able to figure out the year real quick, right? So, like, his 1950, they're both on the Kansas City Monarchs at the same time. Satchel Paige has been released by Cleveland, and he's out of Major League Baseball. He is actually playing for a team in Des Moines earlier in the summer called the Des Moines Black Barons, and Satchel Paige pitched for them for, like, several weeks before he signs with the Kansas City Monarchs and then ends up back in Des Moines. Ernie Banks is also playing for the Kansas City Monarchs in 1950, but not the whole season, which actually was super helpful as I kind of ripped through it because they played in Des Moines multiple times. There's only one time that they were both on the team. Okay. So if Satchel Paige threw Ernie Banks batting practice at Pioneer Park in Des Moines, it had to be that day. Game. Yeah. And that's like, I bet I spent like 4 hours sifting digital collections of old newspapers and then like Baseball Reference and going through like all these different things where it's like, but that's what's fun to me. It's like history is such a puzzle sometimes. And like, if you really want, if now I'm probably going to end up doing this later. Like I'll be looking for George Roddy, Keokuk High School golf results in the Gate City newspaper, because it's like, if you care to look, a lot of times you can find the answer to your question. Oh yeah. I mean, it's more frustrating when you can't, which does happen to me frequently. But this one was super fun because then it was like, and I immediately called my dad, who loves baseball and loves the Cubs. So he's a big Ernie Banks fan. My dad grew up in Chicago, in the city. My grandfather was a police officer in Chicago at the 42nd Precinct at Wrigley Field. So like my dad grew up right there. Okay. Like, and like spent his, like, he used to work cleaning the seats at where the Chicago Cubs. So like Ernie Banks is one of my dad's biggest heroes. And I was like, hey, I figured out Satchel Paige pitched Ernie Banks batting practice in Des Moines on this day. And it was just like a fun moment to share with somebody else that like feels that same magic. Yeah. You know?
What did your dad say?
Oh, he was excited about it. You know, like he's whatever. He very supportive, but then it's like also like he's always letting me know like which calendar entries on notes he finds interesting. And I'm like, yeah, the baseball ones, I know. Yeah. Or like you kind of know like what people are going to find interesting.
Yeah. So his connection with Iowa was basically those times when he was here.
He's passing through. There's a couple of Iowa connections with him that are interesting. So, like, it's a non-standard calendar post because him and Ernie Banks don't have, like, they're not Iowans. He does spend a few weeks here playing for the Des Moines Black Barons. He's going to draw huge crowds playing in, like, all sorts of weird places where, like, one of my other theories with Satchel Paige is, like, in the 1950s, in particular, after he's out of Major League Baseball, and he's like touring with these other teams and barnstorming around. He's playing in places like Humboldt or like Bancroft up to the northwest of Mason City, where it's like Bancroft is a town today of like 200 people in Kossuth County, which is 99.7% white population. So it's like Satchel Paige showing up there in 1950 and then reading the newspaper reports, like people are like super excited to meet Satchel Paige, and like you're seeing pictures in the newspaper, you're like I honest to God thought to myself, like, and maybe this is unfair, but I was like, is this the first black person any of those people ever met? Like, because that's a real question, maybe in 1950.
It could be, yeah. It could
like,
be.
I don't know. Maybe that's just me being like, but like he's around for that. But then he also, So his other interesting Iowa connection that I worked backwards towards was before he makes Major League Baseball. So one of the greatest pitchers of Major League Baseball history, who also pitched for Cleveland, is a guy named Bob Feller. They called him the heater from Van Meter. And he was incredible. I mean, he's one of the most dominant pitchers in Major League Baseball during this era around World War II. And he's from just west of Des Moines. And him and Satchel Paige actually strike up a friendship before Satchel Paige ends up on Cleveland, who Bob Feller pitched for also. Bob Feller, starting in 1946, sorry. Yeah. All right, so Bob Feller in 1946 is going to form this kind of like barnstorming tour of Bob Feller's All-Stars. And in this, he pitched for one team and Satchel Paige pitched for the other team.
Okay.
And they like flew from town to town. That was a big deal because they like took airplanes. That was one of the things, like, as I was reading about it more, like, everybody in the newspaper was like, they came in an airplane. It's like,
it's a big deal.
Well, yeah, it's like 1940s, I guess. Like, you're just after World War II. I guess, like, and Bob Feller was coming off one of the most successful Major League Baseball pitching careers ever, whatever. But, like, so then they kind of teamed up. So then that Bob Feller All-Star tour played all around the country, but it played a lot in Iowa, and it kind of connected. And this is another one of those things, like, I keep saying this, I guess, where it's like, if I get the time or when I get the time, it's like, there's a moment of intersection there where it's like, so Bob Feller is done maybe playing with Cleveland, and Satchel Paige is about to get signed by them and win a World Series, but they spend this tour barnstorming together. And is that what convinced it? Like, does Bob Feller then have a role in convincing Cleveland to sign Satchel Paige?
Interesting question.
Because, like, they're developing this relationship where it's like they're together all summer. Oh, man, this is another good book idea. We're coming up with...
I know, interesting question. And that's what me and you talked about, like ordinary people just changing the course of history. It could be that connection.
Well, and that's where, like, that's what I love about, like, because I think sometimes people get caught up in history and they get, like, washed in these huge monumental waves where it's like the smallest things that people do still really matter. And it's like, it's not like, I hate when people say it's who you know, but it's like, sometimes it is who you know. And it's like what you can do with the opportunities they can open up for you. And I think both those things I talk to my students about that all the time. Like, if you're not ready for the opportunity when it presents itself, you're never going to be able to capitalize on it.
No.
But, like, you do need to, like, also try to get to know the right people. And then when they offer you the opportunity to do stuff or, like, using connection or, like, whatever. And that's what I think in history I find so interesting. And I've learned repeatedly through doing the calendar where it's like, and I think you've seen this with the podcast too, to an extent, where it's like, you've had some people on the Iowa Civil Rights Podcast that are incredible and are so tied to these Iowa stories and bring them to life in such different ways. And I've seen the same thing with, like, the Notes on Iowa calendar, where it's like when I do the Iowa Time Machine posts daily, it's like I connect with people in different ways, and then other people come in and contribute other parts of the story. They go like, oh, have you thought about doing this? Or have you, and, like, I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, where then you start to connect these, and you go like, oh, all right, yeah, I'll definitely, like, I'll find a place to get that on there, and I'll learn about it, because, like, I'll learn about anything.
Yeah, because it could be Bob just talk to the coach, like, hey, you need to look at this guy real close. I can bring him in.
If this connection, I don't know. I've been playing with the idea of, like, I'm still 2 books out, but it's like, man, Satchel Paige, Bob Feller could potentially be, like, I'm always trying to think about, like, what books sell.
Yeah.
So it's like,
maybe the name of the book would be Connection to the Bigger Picture.
Well, and I just think, like, I'd put Bob Feller and Satchel Paige in the title so, like, old guys would read it while they're falling asleep in their armchairs. But, like, baseball books sell. Easy to do that. But, like, that's one of the things that, like, just even the idea of the barnstorming tour with those 2 immortal legends that everybody's familiar with, as we're thinking about, like, baseball at this critical moment, America moving towards desegregation. And I'm not a historian who thinks, like, I don't think like Jackie Robinson is the reason the civil rights movement happened. I've heard people make that case.
Oh, really?
Like, he desegregates baseball. Other people start advocating for it. And I'm like, I think people were advocating for rights consistently over time, well in advance. But it does bring it into the national conversation and forces it into people's day-to-day lives that otherwise maybe wouldn't think about it in the same way.
Yeah.
And like, sports are really important in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
bring people together.
Well, and forces things into conversations in different ways where it's like, I think it's incredible that right around the time that like Major League Baseball is desegregating, Bob Feller, guy from small town Iowa, Satchel Paige, the greatest pitcher in the history of Negro League Baseball, are coming together and pitching against each other every day as they fly in an airplane, which is a new invention across the country. Like, that's an incredible, we don't need to write the book. We need, like, I got to call like a scriptwriter friend. Like, that's like a movie that like somebody would buy.
I wonder if that was intentional for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to learn, like, so like when we talk about like to how we framed this, where it's like George Roddy, where it's like stumbling upon the thing, where it's like, and I want to learn way more about that. You've had some incredible questions that are like, I wonder what we can figure out about early golf in Iowa or those other things, where it's like, this is why I fell in love with history to begin with, is that just like
the little nuggets.
Well, and not just, no, because you just find stuff along, but then it's like, you're never going to know all the answers, which like that, like as a person, man, we're going to venture into your philosophy podcast. Like,
and nothing wrong with that.
As a person that like really, really thinks about process, right? From almost like, it's a, I don't know, without getting into stepping on you and Dr. Greeter's stoicism, but like as somebody who also is like very interested in Marcus Aurelius, thinking about things in that way, where you think about, like being fixated on the process and doing things the right way instead of what the ideal like end product is. Yeah. Like, I just love the process. I was really excited to hear about Ernie Banks pitching at Satchel Paige. That was a fun afternoon. Now it's like, we're here talking about it because it started a different conversation when it ran through Notes on Iowa on the website and on social media.
Can you get access to other cities' local library, like the archive online, or you got to be there physically?
Okay, so local sources, tricky. So some, yes and no, inconsistent across the board. I would say if you're in Iowa in particular, there's what's called the Iowa Newspaper Database. It's hosted by University of Northern Iowa. I don't know the exact address, but if you type in Iowa Newspaper Database into Google, it'll come up. It's hosted by University of Northern Iowa. And it actually gives you a listing of hundreds of newspapers, like individual newspapers, like the Globe Gazette or the Clear Lake Mirror Reporter, for like hundreds of towns in Iowa. And like over the course of decades. So like some of them are better than others. Like we just finished this project in Forest City where we put all of their newspapers back to the 1800s, all the way through like 5 years ago, all the high school yearbooks and all the Waldorf College University yearbooks online in a searchable database that's clippable. A lot of the newspaper stuff I do that way. Other local archive stuff is really hit or miss, but I would say like the best thing to do if you're looking for something in a local community, people that love history love to talk about it. And so it's like, I've always learned, like, if you can have the humility to reach out and have a conversation with somebody, they'll be very excited to tell you the stuff. And like, I had this experience here where like, I was out at Kinney Pioneer Museum, which I never go to. I should go to more. And I was out there because one of my students was interning, and I was talking to this guy that was working out there. We figured out all of a sudden, him and I are both really interested in drain tile, which nobody's interested in. He's like, all of a sudden, like, telling me all these facts. Yeah, like lit all the way up. And like telling me all these different things. And he's showing me these different stuff. And he's like, let's go out to the back building. I got more drain tiles out there. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, as we were there, all of a sudden he like stopped and he's just like, oh, this is the magic. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I've waited for years for somebody to come in here to share this stuff with. Yeah. And it's like, and you can really feel it. Oh, yeah. And that's where it's like, I think sometimes people think about like, and this is one of the things we talk about with our students all the time, where it's like a lot of people get into history because they are like know-it-alls, or like they want to be really smart, right? I'm going to learn all these things. And then it's like, the more you learn, the more you know you don't know anything. Yep. And it's like, And also you learn that like, if you're only learning it for you, what a waste of time and talent.
Yep.
Where it's like, you need to be sharing this stuff with other people, which I mean, is why that's why I started Notes on Iowa, was to connect with a broader community about some of these things. And
my favorite people to talk to on the podcast is people like you.
That never shut up.
I get a chance to ask a question and listen to the whole stories. Just sit back. Because like you say, people who love history, either you love to listen to it or you love to talk about it. So you get somebody like on area, they know their stuff. That's my favorite episode all day, every day. Because I don't have to say nothing. I needed just good 5 questions and that's it. And then I usually get more episode through that. Because I gotta go dig about this. Now, I need to find out about this. So it's like, and that's kind of the place I'm going right now, even on podcasts. Okay, now I know about George Roddy. Okay, that's the biggest story.
Yeah, but then I want to find a George Roddy expert.
You know, and now I gotta find some people in his life that if they did not exist, he would never become this golfer.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the stuff now. It's like I call them the silent voice. It's like, okay, George Roddy, if we find out like he had this trainer that started training him since he was
you're looking for like Aristotle, Socrates.
There you go. There you go.
Like,
it's
who's
like,
the
okay,
teacher?
Yeah, who's the teacher here? And then it's like, now we got to figure out about this teacher. Yeah. Well, Professor, thank you very much, man.
Always
a pleasure.
We'll talk again soon, I bet.
Oh, yeah, I know we will. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing.
Well, until then, keep fighting the good fight, I guess.
All right, thanks.